They found her in the wreckage of the slave caravan, bodies everywhere, broken wagons, the stench of death thick in the winter air. Raiders had hit the convoy at dawn, taken what they wanted, and left the rest to rot. Ronan had only stopped to investigate because his scouts reported movement among the dead. Now he stood at the edge of the carnage, watching his men pick through the ruins, and tried to ignore the familiar weight of disgust settling in his chest. Slavers. He had outlawed the practice in his territories 3 centuries ago, but humans in the southern provinces still clung to the vile trade like a disease. "Your Majesty!" His second in command, Victor, approached with an expression Ronan couldn't read. "What is it?" "We found a survivor. Barely." Victor hesitated. "She's... You should see for yourself." Ronan followed him to the far edge of the wreckage, where a cluster of soldiers had gathered around something on the ground. They parted as he approached, revealing... His breath stopped. She was small, fragile, dressed in rags that barely covered her emaciated frame. Her hair was matted with blood and dirt, her skin so pale it was nearly translucent. Chains circled her wrists and ankles, the iron cutting into flesh that had clearly been bound for months. But it was her eyes that caught him. They were open, aware, a deep forest green that should have been beautiful, but instead held nothing. No fear, no hope, no life at all. She looked at him like she was already dead and was simply waiting for her body to realize it. "She won't speak," Victor said quietly. "We've tried. She just stares." Ronan crouched before her. She didn't flinch, didn't react at all. Just watched him with those empty green eyes. "Can you hear me?" "Nothing." "Can you tell me your name?" "Nothing." "Do you know where you are?" Her lips parted, cracked, bleeding. She tried to form words, but only a rasping sound emerged, the voice of someone who hadn't spoken in a very long time, or couldn't. Ronan's jaw tightened. He had seen cruelty before, had witnessed the worst humanity had to offer over 400 years of living. But something about this woman, this shell of a woman, made his blood burn with a fury he hadn't felt in decades. "Bring her to my chambers," he ordered. Victor's eyebrows rose. "Your Majesty?" "Now." Ronan straightened, his voice brooking no argument. "Have the healer meet us there, and find someone to remove these chains without causing more damage." "Sire, she's human, a slave. The court will talk." "Let them." Ronan turned to face his second, and whatever Victor saw in his expression made him take a step back. "This woman has been starved, beaten, and broken. She will be cared for. In my chambers, where I can ensure no one harms her further." His voice dropped to a growl. "Is that understood?" "Yes, Your Majesty." Ronan turned back to the woman on the ground. She was still watching him, those empty eyes tracking his movements with something that might have been confusion. "I'm going to lift you now," he said, keeping his voice gentle. "I won't hurt you. I promise." She didn't respond, didn't nod or flinch or show any sign that she understood. Ronan lifted her anyway. She weighed nothing, less than nothing, a collection of bones and bruises wrapped in rags that should have been burned. He cradled her against his chest and felt her heartbeat, thready, weak, but present. Alive, he thought. Barely, but alive. As he carried her toward his horse, her hand moved, slowly, painfully, her fingers curled into the fabric of his shirt. Not gripping, just holding, like she was anchoring herself to something solid. Like she was afraid he might disappear. Something cracked in Ronan's chest, something he had kept locked away for centuries. "You're safe now," he murmured against her matted hair. "I don't know who you are or what happened to you, but I swear on my life, no one will ever hurt you again." She didn't respond. Her eyes had closed, her body going limp with exhaustion or surrender or both. But her fingers stayed curled in his shirt the entire ride back to the castle. The healer's face was grim when she emerged from Ronan's chambers 3 hours later. "She's severely malnourished, dehydrated, multiple broken bones that healed incorrectly, scars on her back consistent with repeated whipping." The elderly Lycan woman shook her head. "Whoever owned her treated her worse than an animal. Will she survive?" "Physically, possibly, with time and proper care." The healer hesitated. "But her spirit, Your Majesty? I'm not sure there's anything left to save. Whatever they did to her, it broke something fundamental. She didn't respond to anything I did, didn't cry when I set her bones, didn't speak, just existed. She tried to speak when we found her." "Then there may be hope, but it will take more than medicine to reach her." The healer met his eyes. "She needs someone who won't give up on her, someone who will keep trying even when she gives nothing back." Ronan thought about those empty green eyes, about the fingers curled in his shirt, about the way she had looked at him like she was already dead. "I won't give up," he said. "Why?" The healer's voice was curious, not challenging. "You don't know her. She's human, a former slave. Why does she matter?" It was a fair question. Ronan didn't have a fair answer. "Because when I looked at her," he said slowly, "something in me recognized something in her. I can't explain it. I don't understand it. But I know—" He paused, struggling for words. "I know I was supposed to find her, and I know I'm supposed to save her." The healer studied him for a long moment. Then she smiled, small, knowing, sad. "The mate bond works in mysterious ways, Your Majesty, even when we don't recognize it." She left before he could ask what she meant. Ronan entered his chambers quietly. She was in his bed, the first time anyone had occupied it in over a century. The healers had cleaned her, dressed her in soft cotton, bandaged her wounds. With the dirt and blood washed away, he could see her face clearly for the first time. She was beautiful, not in the polished way of court ladies or the dramatic way of seductresses. Beautiful in a quiet, delicate way, like the first flower pushing through snow. Like something that should have been crushed, but somehow survived. Her eyes were closed, sleeping, finally. But even in sleep, her brow was furrowed, her hands clenched in the blankets. Ronan pulled a chair to the bedside and sat down. "I don't know if you can hear me," he said softly. "I don't know if you're even in there anymore. But I'm going to talk to you anyway. Because silence is what they used to break you, and I refuse to let them win." He reached out and carefully, gently, uncurled her fingers from the blanket. Her hand was small in his, fragile, but warm. "My name is Ronan. I'm the king of these territories. You're in my castle, in my chambers, and you're safe. No one will ever chain you again. No one will ever hurt you again." He squeezed her hand gently. "I don't know who you are. I don't know your name or your story or how you ended up in that caravan. But I know this. You survived. Against all odds, you survived. And that means there's something in you worth fighting for." Her fingers twitched in his grip, just once, just barely. But it was enough. "I'm going to sit right here," Ronan said, "and I'm going to keep talking. And when you're ready, Whenever you're ready, I'll be here to listen. He settled back in the chair, her hand still in his, and began to tell her about his kingdom, about the mountains and the forests and the wolves that ran beneath the moon, about the centuries he had lived and the loneliness that had become so familiar he'd forgotten it was there. He talked until his voice grew hoarse and the candles burned low. And somewhere in the darkness, her fingers curled around his and held on. The first week was the hardest. She didn't speak, didn't eat unless food was placed directly in her hands, didn't move unless guided. She existed in a state somewhere between sleeping and waking, her green eyes open but seeing nothing, responding to nothing. Ronan stayed anyway. He moved his work to the sitting area of his chambers, conducting meetings and signing documents while she lay motionless in his bed. His advisers thought he had lost his mind. His court whispered about the human slave who had bewitched their king. He ignored them all. Every morning, he sat beside her and talked about the weather, about kingdom business, about the dreams he'd had and the memories that haunted him. He didn't expect responses. He just wanted her to know she wasn't alone. On the 8th day, she ate without prompting. The healer had left a bowl of broth on the bedside table, as she did every meal. Usually, Ronan had to lift the spoon to her lips, coax her to swallow. But this time, when he turned from the window, she was sitting up. The bowl was in her lap. The spoon was in her hand. She was feeding herself. Ronan didn't move, didn't breathe. He watched her lift the spoon with trembling fingers, watched her bring it to her cracked lips, watched her swallow. When the bowl was empty, she looked at him. Not through him, not past him, at him. Good, he said softly, his voice rough with emotion he didn't fully understand. That's good? She didn't respond, but she didn't look away either. It was progress. By the second week, she was walking, short distances at first, from the bed to the window and back. Her legs were weak, her balance unsteady. The first time she tried, she collapsed after 3 steps. Ronan caught her before she hit the floor. Easy, he murmured, steadying her. There's no rush. You have all the time in the world. She looked up at him, and for the first time, he saw something flicker in those empty green eyes. Not hope. Not yet. But something. Confusion, maybe. Or curiosity. Why was he helping her? Why did he care? He wished he had an answer for her. For himself. Let's try again, he said instead. They did. Again and again and again. Each day she walked a little farther. Each day she grew a little stronger. Each day the emptiness in her eyes receded by the smallest degree. On the 15th day, she touched him voluntarily for the first time. He was reading by the fire, giving her space to rest, when he felt something brush his shoulder. He looked up to find her standing beside his chair, her hand resting tentatively on his arm. "What is it?" he asked gently. "Do you need something?" She opened her mouth, closed it. Frustration flickered across her features, the first real emotion he had seen from her. "Take your time," he said. "I'm not going anywhere." She tried again. Her throat worked. Her lips formed shapes that might have been words. And then, name. The single syllable was barely audible. Rasping. Broken. But it was speech. "My name?" Ronan asked. She shook her head slowly, lifted her hand from his arm and pressed it to her own chest. Her name. She was trying to remember her own name. "You don't have to remember right now," Ronan said, his heart cracking for her. "It will come back when you're ready." But she was determined. He could see it in the set of her jaw, the furrow of her brow. She closed her eyes, her whole body trembling with effort. Neve. The word fell from her lips like a stone into still water. She swayed, exhausted by the effort, and Ronan caught her before she could fall. Neve, he repeated, cradling her against his chest. Your name is Neve. She nodded weakly, her face pressed to his shoulder. And then, so quietly, he almost missed it. Thank you. 2 words, her first 2 words. Ronan held her while she cried. The first tears she had shed since he'd found her. Great, racking sobs that shook her fragile frame. He didn't try to stop them, didn't offer empty comfort, just held her and let her break. Because sometimes breaking was the first step toward healing. By the 3rd week, Neve was speaking in sentences, short ones, halting, full of long pauses where words should have been, but sentences nonetheless. She told him what she remembered. Fragments and flashes, nothing coherent. A village burned, family lost, chains, pain. Men who used her for labor until she collapsed, then beat her for collapsing. Years of it, an eternity of it. She had stopped speaking because words invited punishment, had stopped fighting because resistance brought worse pain, had stopped hoping because hope was a cruelty all its own. They told me I was nothing, she said one evening, sitting by the fire while Ronan worked at his desk. Every day, every hour. Nothing. Worthless. Less than an animal. They were wrong. Were they? She looked at her hands, scarred, calloused, trembling. Look at me. I'm broken. I can barely walk, barely speak. I don't remember half my life. What worth could I possibly have? Ronan set down his quill and crossed to where she sat. He knelt before her, taking her damaged hands in his. You survived, he said. Years of abuse that would have destroyed anyone else, and you survived. You're sitting here, speaking to me, fighting your way back from the dead. That's not worthless, Neve. That's extraordinary. Her eyes glistened. You keep saying things like that, like you believe them. I do believe them. Why? You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. No, he agreed. I don't owe you anything. I help you because I want to. Because when I found you in that wreckage, something in me recognized something in you. He squeezed her hands gently. I can't explain it. I've tried. But I know, that finding you was not an accident, that you matter, that you're meant for something more than the suffering you've endured. Neve stared at him. In the firelight, her green eyes shimmered, no longer empty, but full of something raw and desperate. The healer said something to you, she whispered, that first night, about the mate bond. Ronan went very still. You heard that? I heard everything. I just couldn't respond. Her fingers tightened on his. Is it true? Am I your mate? I don't know. The honesty cost him. The bond usually announces itself clearly. This feels different, quieter, like something waiting to bloom. He met her eyes. But I know that I've lived 400 years without feeling anything like what I feel when I'm with you. I know that seeing you hurt makes me want to burn the world. I know that your voice is the first sound I want to hear in the morning and the last I want to hear at night. That sounds like love. Maybe it is. He lifted her hands to his lips, pressing a kiss to her scarred knuckles. Whatever it is, I'm not walking away from it. From you. Neve's breath caught. A tear slid down her cheek. Not grief this time, but something softer. "I don't know how to be loved," she said. "I don't know if I'm capable of loving back. They took so much from me." "Then we'll figure it out together." Ronan reached up to brush the tear from her cheek. "No pressure, no expectations, just together, for as long as you want." "What if I want forever?" The question hung in the air between them, fragile and terrifying and full of hope. "Then forever is what you'll get." Neve leaned forward and pressed her forehead to his. "I'm still broken," she whispered. "So am I." He closed his eyes. "Maybe that's why we fit." They stayed like that for a long time, breathing the same air, sharing the same space, two broken people learning that together might mean whole. A month passed. Then two. Neve grew stronger every day. Her voice returned fully, soft and musical, with a slight rasp that would never completely fade. Her body healed, filling out with proper food and rest until she no longer looked like a ghost. She learned to laugh again, to smile, to look at the world with something other than fear. And she learned Ronan. She learned that he was patient beyond measure, that he never raised his voice or showed frustration, no matter how many times she stumbled. She learned that he had ruled alone for 4 centuries, that his parents had died when he was young, that he had convinced himself he didn't need anyone. She learned that he was lying to himself, that beneath the crown and the power was a man as lonely as she had been, as starving for connection. "You don't have to stay in your chambers anymore," he told her one morning. "You're well enough to have your own rooms, proper quarters, befitting—" "Do you want me to leave?" The question stopped him cold. "What?" "Your chambers." Neve set down her teacup and met his eyes. "Do you want me to leave them?" Ronan was quiet for a long moment. "No," he admitted finally. "I don't." "Then I'll stay." "The court will talk. They already think—" "Let them think whatever they want." She rose from her chair and crossed to where he stood by the window. "I spent years being told where to go, what to do, how to exist. For the first time in my life, someone is giving me a choice." She reached up to touch his face, her fingers tracing the sharp line of his jaw. "I choose to stay with you." Ronan caught her hand, pressed a kiss to her palm. "You're sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything." He pulled her into his arms, and Neve let herself be held, let herself feel safe in a way she had never thought possible. She was falling in love with him. She knew it, had known it for weeks. But the words stuck in her throat, trapped behind walls that years of abuse had built. Soon, she promised herself. Soon she would find the courage to say it. The court's whispers grew louder as the weeks passed. Neve heard them everywhere, in the halls, in the gardens, in the dining room when nobles thought she couldn't hear. The human slave, the king's pet, the broken thing he had dragged in from the wreckage and couldn't seem to throw away. She tried not to let it hurt, tried to remember that their opinions didn't matter, that Ronan's love was the only thing she needed. But late at night, when the castle was quiet and Ronan slept beside her, the doubts crept in. What if they were right? What if she was just a project to him, a wounded bird he felt obligated to heal? What if one day he woke up and realized she wasn't worth the trouble? "You're thinking too loudly." Neve startled. Ronan's eyes were open, watching her in the moonlight. "I didn't mean to wake you." "You didn't. I felt your distress through the bond." He propped himself up on one elbow. "Tell me." "It's nothing." "It's not nothing. Not if it's keeping you awake." He reached out to brush hair from her face. "Talk to me, Neve." She was quiet for a long moment. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, "What if you realize I'm not enough?" "What?" "The court thinks I'm worthless. A slave, a charity case. What if they're right? What if one day you look at me and see what everyone else sees?" Ronan sat up fully, his expression fierce in the moonlight. "Do you know what I see when I look at you?" He cupped her face in his hands, forcing her to meet his eyes. "I see the strongest person I've ever known. I see someone who survived horrors that would have destroyed anyone else. I see kindness that should have been beaten out of you but somehow survived. I see beauty that has nothing to do with your face and everything to do with your soul." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "Ronan, the court sees a former slave. I see my future queen." His thumbs brushed away her tears. "I see my mate, the other half of my soul that I've been searching for since before you were born. I see the woman I want to spend the rest of eternity with, if she'll have me." "You've never said that before." "The mate part." "Because I wasn't sure you were ready to hear it." His voice softened. "The bond has been growing since the moment I found you. Every day, every conversation, every moment we spend together. It gets stronger. I didn't want to pressure you, didn't want to make you feel obligated, but I can't hide it anymore." He pressed his forehead to hers. "You're my mate, Neve. My fated. My everything." The words broke something open inside her. All the walls she'd built, all the defenses she'd constructed, they crumbled like sand. "I love you," she whispered. Ronan went very still. "I've wanted to say it for weeks. I was just afraid. Afraid that if I said it out loud, it would be taken away, like everything else good in my life." She laughed shakily. "But I can't not say it anymore. I love you, Ronan. I love you so much it terrifies me." He kissed her. It was their first real kiss, soft and tender, and full of all the words neither of them could say. She melted into him, her hands fisting in his shirt, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Ronan smiled. "I love you too," he said. "I've loved you since the moment you curled your fingers into my shirt and held on. I've loved you every moment since. I will love you for the rest of eternity." "Promise?" "I promise." He kissed her again, softer this time. No more doubts, no more fears. Whatever the court says, whatever challenges we face them together. "Together?" she agreed. She fell asleep in his arms, her heart lighter than it had been in years. The doubts didn't disappear entirely. Probably never would. But with Ronan beside her, they felt smaller, manageable. Like maybe she could survive them after all. The next few weeks were the happiest of Neve's life. She and Ronan fell into an easy rhythm. Mornings spent walking the gardens while he pointed out flowers she'd never seen. Afternoons in the library where she was learning to read. Evenings by the fire talking about everything and nothing. She discovered she had a talent for healing herbs, a memory that must have survived from a life she could barely remember. The castle healer took her under her wing, teaching her the names of plants and their uses. For the first time, Neve had a purpose beyond survival. "You're glowing," Ronan told her one evening as she catalogued dried lavender in the healer's workroom. "I'm covered in plant dust." "That too." He crossed to her and wrapped his arms around her from behind. "But mostly glowing. Happy." "I am happy." She leaned back into his warmth. "I didn't think I could be. I thought that part of me was dead. It was sleeping. He pressed a kiss to her temple, waiting for the right moment to wake up. She turned in his arms, rising on her toes to kiss him properly. "I love you," she said. She said it often now, making up for all the years she'd been unable to say anything at all. "Have I mentioned that today?" "Only 3 times." He grinned. "I could use a 4th. I love you. And a 5th. I love you. I love you. I love you." He silenced her with his mouth, and Neve melted into the kiss, into the happiness, into the impossible miracle of being loved. She had been too weak to speak when he found her. Now she couldn't imagine ever being silent again. The past came for her on a cold winter morning. Neve was in the healer's workroom, grinding dried chamomile into powder, when the door burst open. A young guard stood in the entrance, his face pale. "My lady, you need to come to the Great Hall. Now." "What's wrong?" "There's a man. He claims—" The guard swallowed. "He claims to be your former master." The world tilted. The mortar slipped from Neve's fingers, shattering against the stone floor. No, 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 no. She followed the guard on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Her lungs refused to draw full breaths. Every step toward the great hall felt like a step backward in time. He found me. He found me. He found me. The great hall was packed. Nobles lined the walls, their faces avid with curiosity. Ronan sat on his throne, his expression carved from ice. And standing before him, flanked by 2 nervous-looking men, was a figure from Neve's nightmares. Lord Brennan. He looked exactly as she remembered. Thin, cruel, with cold eyes that had watched her suffer for years without a flicker of remorse. He was dressed in fine clothes now, his hair slicked back, a smile on his face that made her stomach turn. "Ah, there she is." His voice slithered across the hall. "My property, returned at last." Neve froze in the doorway. She couldn't move, couldn't speak. 3 months of healing evaporated in an instant, and she was back in chains, back in the darkness, back in the place where speaking meant pain. "She's not your property." Ronan's voice cut through her panic. "She's not anyone's property." "With respect, Your Majesty, I have documentation proving my ownership. The slave markets in the southern provinces keep excellent records." Brennan produced a scroll from his coat. "This woman was purchased by me 7 years ago. She remains legally mine." "Your slave markets have no jurisdiction here. I outlawed human slavery in my territories 3 centuries ago." "But she wasn't acquired in your territories. She was acquired in the human provinces, where slavery remains legal." Brennan's smile widened. "By international treaty, I have every right to reclaim my property, regardless of where she has wandered." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Neve saw nobles exchanging glances, saw the calculation in their eyes. The law was on Brennan's side. Everyone knew it. Neve. Ronan's voice broke through the fog. She looked at him, her anchor, her salvation, her love, and saw something fierce burning in his golden eyes. "Come here." Her legs obeyed before her mind could catch up. She crossed the hall on trembling feet, feeling Brennan's gaze on her like a brand. When she reached the throne, Ronan stood and descended the steps to meet her. "Look at me," he murmured, cupping her face in his hands. "Only at me. He can't hurt you. I won't let him." "The law? Damn the law." His thumbs brushed her cheeks. "You are my mate, my queen. No treaty, no document, No man will ever take you from me." "This is absurd," Brennan snapped. "She's a slave, a piece of property. You can't simply— I can do whatever I want." Ronan turned to face Brennan, positioning his body between Neve and her former master. "I'm a king, and you are in my court, making demands of me regarding the woman I love." "The woman you—" Brennan laughed, high and mocking. "You can't be serious. She's garbage, broken. I nearly worked her to death a dozen times. What could you possibly see in—" "Careful." The single word dropped the temperature in the hall by 10 degrees. "Very careful, Lord Brennan. You're speaking about my future queen." "Your future?" Brennan's face contorted with disbelief. "You would marry a slave? A nothing? She can't even speak properly. I beat the words out of her years ago." Something snapped inside Neve. The fear that had frozen her since Brennan walked in suddenly transformed into something else. Something hot. Something fierce. Something that had been building for 7 years. She stepped out from behind Ronan. "I can speak." Her voice rang clear across the silent hall. Brennan's eyes widened. "I can speak," she repeated, louder now. "You tried to beat it out of me. You tried to break me. You told me every day that I was nothing, that I was worthless, that I deserved every pain you inflicted." "Neve." Brennan's voice had lost its smoothness. "But I survived." She stepped closer, and something in her expression made him take a step back. "I survived you. I survived the chains and the whips and the starvation. I survived the caravan massacre that killed everyone else. I survived, and I found someone who showed me what I'm actually worth." She turned to face the crowd, the nobles who had whispered about her, the court that had questioned her place. "You want to know what he sees in me?" Her voice carried to every corner. "He sees strength. He sees survival. He sees a woman who was broken down to nothing and rebuilt herself into something more." She looked at Ronan, and her heart swelled with love. "He sees me, the real me, not the slave or the property or the broken thing. Me." She turned back to Brennan. "I'm not your property anymore. I'm not anyone's property. I'm Neve, mate to the Lycan king, future queen of these territories, and the woman who survived everything you did to me." She lifted her chin. "And if you ever come near me again, I will personally ensure you experience every moment of suffering you inflicted on me. That's not a threat. That's a promise." The hall was utterly silent. Then Ronan began to laugh. It was a warm sound, full of pride and love and fierce satisfaction. He crossed to Neve and pulled her into his arms. "That," he said, "was magnificent. I meant every word. I know you did." He kissed her forehead, then turned to face Brennan with a predator's smile. "You heard my mate, my queen. Leave now, and I'll let you live. Stay 1 moment longer, and I'll let her keep her promise." Brennan's face had gone the colour of old cheese. He looked around the hall, searching for allies, finding none. "This isn't over," he hissed. "Yes, it is." Ronan's voice was soft, deadly. "If you ever set foot in my territories again, if you ever speak her name, send her messages, so much as think about her, I will hunt you down personally. And what I do to you will make her years of suffering look like a holiday." Brennan ran. The doors slammed behind him, and the hall erupted in noise. Shocked whispers, impressed murmurs, a few scattered cheers from servants who had grown to love their future queen. Neve sagged against Ronan's chest. "It's over?" she whispered. "It's over." He held her tight. "He'll never touch you again. No one will ever touch you again. I was so scared. When he walked in, I couldn't. I was back there, back in that place. I know. I felt it through the bond. He pulled back to look at her face. But you didn't stay there. You fought your way out. You stood up to him. You spoke. Tears streamed down her cheeks. I couldn't let him win. Not again. Not after everything. You didn't. Ronan kissed away her tears. You won, Neve. You won. She laughed, shaky, wet, but real. I want the bonding ceremony, she said suddenly. Tonight. I don't want to wait anymore. I want to be yours officially, permanently, forever. Ronan's eyes blazed gold. Tonight, he agreed. Forever. And the woman who had been too weak to speak finally knew exactly what she wanted to say. The bonding ceremony took place at midnight, beneath a sky blazing with stars. Word had spread through the castle like wildfire. By the time the hour arrived, every Lycan in the territory had gathered. Warriors and servants, nobles and commoners, all of them crowding into the great hall to witness history. A former slave becoming queen. A broken woman claiming her throne. Neve stood at the entrance, her heart pounding. Her gown was silver and white, simple but elegant, chosen because it reminded her of moonlight on snow. Her hair was loose, threaded with tiny white flowers that the healer had insisted upon. She wore no jewelry except for a single silver chain around her throat, a gift from Ronan, given that morning. For the voice they tried to silence, he had said, may it never be quiet again. The doors swung open. She walked down the aisle alone. No family to escort her. They were long dead or lost to memory. No attendants to support her. She needed no one to hold her up anymore. She walked alone because she had earned it, because she had survived, because she wanted every person in that hall to see that she was choosing this of her own free will. Ronan waited at the altar, dressed in black and silver, his golden eyes tracking her every step. When she reached him, he took her hands, and she felt his grip tremble. The Lycan king, ancient and powerful, feared across the realm, trembling for her. You're shaking, she murmured. I've waited 400 years for this moment. His voice was rough. I'm allowed to shake. The elder stepped forward, her white hair gleaming in the candlelight. We gather tonight to witness a bonding, she announced, the joining of two souls who found each other against impossible odds, the creation of a partnership forged in suffering and tempered in love. She turned to Ronan. Ronan, king of the Northern Territories, do you claim this woman as your mate? Your equal? Your queen? I do. His voice rang clear through the hall. I claim her with every breath in my body. I will love her, protect her, and honor her for the rest of eternity. The elder turned to Neve. Neve, survivor of shadows, keeper of silence broken. Do you accept this claim? Do you bind yourself to this man freely, without coercion or fear? Neve thought about the wreckage where Ronan had found her, the chains, the emptiness, the absolute certainty that she would never speak again, never matter again, never be anything but a broken thing waiting to die. Then she thought about now, about the voice that had returned, about the love that had healed her, about the man standing before her who had seen treasure where everyone else had seen trash. I do, she said, her voice strong and clear. I accept him with my whole heart. I will stand beside him, support him, and love him for as long as I live. Then let the bond be sealed. Ronan produced the silver blade. Neve held out her palm without hesitation. The cut was shallow, barely a sting. When their hands clasped together, blood meeting blood, Neve felt the bond snap fully into place. It was overwhelming. Ronan's love flooded through her, fierce and protective and all-consuming. His joy, so bright it nearly blinded her. His relief, 4 centuries of loneliness, finally ending in this single perfect moment. And beneath it all, a sense of completion, of 2 halves becoming whole, of finding home after a lifetime of wandering. "By blood and moonlight," the elder declared. "By choice and covenant. These 2 are bound. What fate has joined, let no force sunder." The crowd erupted. Howls rose into the night, wild, joyous, primal. Lycans, who had watched their king rule alone for centuries, finally released their hope in the only way they knew how. Ronan pulled Neve into his arms and kissed her deeply, thoroughly, in front of everyone. She melted into him, her hands fisting in his shirt, just as they had the first day, the day he had carried her broken body from the wreckage and refused to let her die. "My queen," he murmured against her lips. "My mate. My heart." "My king," she whispered back. "My savior. My home." When they finally broke apart, Ronan raised their joined hands high. "Your queen," he roared. "Bow to her as you bow to me." As one, the entire assembly dropped to their knees. Warriors and nobles, servants and soldiers, hundreds of people bowing to the woman who had been too weak to speak. Neve looked out at the sea of bowed heads and let the tears fall. She had been silent for so long, had been nothing for so long, had believed, truly believed, that she would die in chains without anyone ever knowing her name. And now, a kingdom knelt at her feet. The celebration lasted until dawn. There was feasting and dancing and more joy than Neve had ever witnessed. People she had never met approached her with blessings, telling her that her story had given them hope, that her survival meant something, that her voice mattered. Through it all, Ronan never left her side. "How do you feel?" he asked as the sky began to lighten. "Like I'm dreaming?" She leaned against him, exhausted and elated. "Like I'm going to wake up in that wreckage, still dying, still silent?" "You'll never be silent again." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "I won't let you. I'll spend every day for the rest of eternity giving you reasons to speak." 1 year later, Neve stood in the healer's workroom, teaching a young apprentice the uses of chamomile. So much had changed since that winter morning when Brennan had burst into her new life. He was dead now, killed in a tavern brawl 3 months after fleeing the Lycan territories. Neve had felt nothing when she heard the news. He had ceased to matter the moment she chose to stop being afraid of him. The court had accepted her fully. The nobles, who had once whispered about the king's pet, now sought her counsel on matters of healing and diplomacy. The servants adored her. The people loved her. And Ronan loved her more with each passing day. "You're glowing again," he said from the doorway. Neve looked up and smiled. "I'm covered in herb dust again." "That too." He crossed to her and wrapped his arms around her from behind, nodding apologetically to the apprentice, who was trying very hard not to giggle. But mostly glowing. Neve turned in his arms. "I have something to tell you." "Oh!" The healer confirmed it this morning. She took his hand and pressed it to her stomach. "I'm pregnant." Ronan went utterly still. "We're going to have a baby," Neve continued, her voice trembling with joy. a family, something I never thought I'd have, something I never thought I deserved. Neve? His voice cracked. Tears spilled down his face, the first she had ever seen from him. Are you… is this… real? She laughed, crying too. It's real. We're going to be parents. He kissed her like the world was ending and beginning at once. Then he dropped to his knees and pressed his forehead to her stomach, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. I love you, he whispered against her belly. Both of you. I love you so much. Neve ran her fingers through his hair, overwhelmed by happiness so vast it seemed impossible. She had been found in wreckage, broken beyond repair, too weak to speak, too empty to hope. And now, she was a queen, a healer, a mate, a mother. The woman who had been silent now had a voice that carried across kingdoms. The woman who had been nothing now had everything. And she would spend the rest of her very long life making sure no one ever felt as alone as she once had. Because that, she had learned, was what voices were for. Not just to speak, but to reach out to the broken and tell them they were not alone. If you loved Neve and Ronan's story, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new tale. Drop a comment below telling me your favorite part. I read every single one. Until next time, stay wild.